A lot of no's that you might be experiencing are not no's at all. They're indecision. And so what we need is basically a systematic approach where we can use our full brain power and therefore make it easier for people to make a decision.
Most of the no's your business is getting right now aren't no's at all, they're indecision. And there's a proven science to turning that around. Patrick Van Der Burght is a Cialdini-certified trainer, founding member of the Cialdini Institute, and has been teaching ethical persuasion to businesses for over 25 years.
Patrick, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me, Scherrie. It's great to be here.
You know what? I am very interested in the topic that we're talking about today because I always want to know how to get people to say yes more. And so the word is you have some secret sauce that you're going to share with us today.
Absolutely. We're going to be sharing insights on how people make decisions, which will explain how over time it's been seeming to be getting harder to get people to say yes to our proposals and our requests and to get them to buy into our ideas. And we'll explain why that is happening, but we'll also explain the psychology of how you can make it easier for people to make a yes decision. And yeah, it should be an empowering episode. Goodness, I've been enthusiastic about this for like 25 years already, but it's still lasting. But I love seeing it like when I'm speaking to an audience full of people, I love seeing the eyes slowly get bigger as we reveal more of how this works, that there's a way to get people to buy into what it is you're pitching to them or convincing them about. And you don't have to lie or cheat. It's just raising the right pieces of information. So I'm hoping to get that same reaction in your audience, even though we can't see those eyeballs at the moment.
Listen, when I first started learning more about ethical persuasion and behavioral science, I thought it was very interesting because no is a full sentence in and of itself. So to get people to change their mind or even consider what you're saying by using some of these techniques, I think is awesome. How do you start? Because for someone who may not have any experience or know, what ethical persuasion is, how do you get people to understand what it is so that they can start using some of these techniques?
All right, so let's maybe start by describing it, which I'm still trying to figure out how to describe it optimally, but this is what I've got at the moment. Ethical persuasion is enabling people to be more successful, to reach their goals, regardless if that's sales related or anything else, by raising the right pieces of information in the things we say, but also the things we see. So images also play into this, which make it easier for people to make a yes decision, to enable that yes to come out. Because too often when we try and convince people with logical, rational reasons why they should follow along with what we're suggesting, and this could be to follow the vision that you have as a leader. It could be for your team managers to do as you asked. It could be for you as an employee to try and get your ideas accepted by those higher up on the hierarchy. And yes, it could also be in sales, marketing, and advertising. If we can be more successful there, if when we ask our request, we often are confronted with no's. But a large percentage of those, I would argue, didn't need to be no's. They were not actually no's. They were indecision. People decided not to decide. And you got a no, so you thought, they didn't like my idea, or they said yes to me last week, but now I've come back. Now they've changed their mind. Or, they said they would purchase and now they don't. Or people just, it's not right for me. It's too expensive. I have to talk about it with my partner, all those sorts of deflections. And we take those as a no, but they could have been a yes. And as we'll discover later on, is that once we start talking the right, I wouldn't even say language, but the right facts, then the impact of that can be quite large. So there's that. Did I do a good job describing it? It's still hard.
No, you did. And I think it's so important because it does not always have to be in a business setting. Like you said, it's basically one of the bases for communication to get your point across and maybe get something that you need from someone. Is that what we're looking at?
Yeah. And well brought up that this is not even just business related. It's really a life skill. This works privately as well when you're trying to get your partner convinced on where you want to go on a holiday, or what you're going to have for dinner at the party this Saturday, or if you want your kids to clean up their room. You have to be persuasive. We rely on that ability, and it's a very much in-demand skill. The World Economic Forum does a report seemingly every 2 years. It's called The Future of Jobs. And they consult, I think, more than 1,000 businesses to figure out what businesses need going forward into the next 5 years. And so in 2023, they published a report and they positioned leadership and social influence, which is another word for ethical persuasion, at position number 4 out of the top 10 skills. Last January in 2025, they raised that to position number 3, because in a world of AI making things more uncertain, it is our interpersonal skills that are getting more and more important. And there's another study which was done by Cashnet, which was published by Forbes. They looked at 17 million job listings on Indeed.com, and they looked for what are employers asking for. And the number 1 skill was strategic thinking. Number 2 was negotiation skills, for which I would argue you need to be persuasive. Number 3 was persuasion itself. And number 4 was presentation skills, which of course are also pointless if you're not persuasive. So it's a very important soft skill that helps us from anywhere in our career. But I'm a bit of an advocate that especially young adults, they should be learning this stuff before they even try and enter the workforce, right? Writing a job application without knowing how to be persuasive, going to an interview without knowing how to get your point across, or goodness, doing wage negotiations if you were successful, all that without knowing the science and how to be persuasive. This should be taught in school, not halfway in our career, but it's good we're here now anyway.
Definitely. And you did not start out with this as a focus. What was the turning point for you where you knew that this was something that you wanted to hone in on and share with others?
Yeah, sure. So I was a sales representative selling scuba diving equipment for a wholesaler here in Australia. And I was looking after 3 states of Australia. And Australia is about the size of the United States. It's a large place, not as many people. But so I was in the car, and there was still cassette tapes back then. And so I was visiting my clients, and sometimes I had to drive like 500 miles to the next client. And I was putting in a lot of work, and I was a dive instructor myself. And so I was very passionate about working in that field. It was great working with something that I loved. And so I was really out there working hard and also trying to help my retailers, but I wasn't really getting the successes that I think were, which I was, I guess, expecting for the amount of effort and care that I was putting in. And I did see some of my competing sales representatives from other companies walk away with large orders, which seemed to be achieved by a bit of unethical behavior, making promises they couldn't really keep and that sort of stuff. So I wanted to do better, but I didn't want to lie or cheat or deceive either. And so at the time, I was very lucky. My boss had hired a business consultant, of course, because we need outside perspectives and get that assistance. And this business consultant had the idea to train us sales reps as sort of business coaches and sales trainers, so we could help our retailers grow their business. And if they grew, we grew with them. And that was, of course, a wonderful approach. And so the gentleman, the business coach, was local to Melbourne, which is where I am. And he invited me that if I had any questions, just to come by the office and have a chat. And I knew how much this guy charged per hour. I don't know if Scherrie, have you ever met a Dutch person on holidays and you've mistakenly said, if you're ever in our neck of the woods, you need a place to stay, we can put you up. Don't do that. Dutch people turn up, right? As in, you're trying to be polite. Dutch people turn up. For the one night free accommodation, they'll travel 2 days around. Anyway, so I did the same thing, as in he's invited me. I'll take that invitation. But he actually liked it because I was implementing strategies. And if they didn't work, I didn't just dismiss them. I would come back and say, what am I doing wrong? What nuance am I missing here? And these people often take a piece of advice and are easy to discount it when it doesn't work for them straight away, instead of buckling down and diving a little deeper. And so he was sharing information or educational cassette tapes and CD series with me. You used to buy those and they were really expensive. I remember paying $1,200 for Brian Tracy CDs, 12 of them, and it was an enormous amount of money, and now it's so inexpensive. But anyway, he lent me this series. I think it was called Mind Capture, some event that happened in Los Angeles before the turn of the century. And Dr. Cialdini had 2 cassette tapes in that series, and it blew me away. The behavioral science, human beings are fascinating, and human behavior is eye-opening. It's interesting. It's sometimes absolutely terrifying, but it's always fascinating. And then when you see the impact that has, you can't help but go, are you serious? Is this how we react to this piece of information? So I was always fascinated with it. And then at that time, I was also confronted with the challenge at work. I'd taken on another brand it was a dry diving suit. If any of your audience do diving, they know what I'm talking about. Is a suit that seals on your neck and your wrist, keeps you dry, and you just wear underneath it whatever is appropriate for the water temperature. And I've used a lot of those suits in my past as a diver. I've also been in the military, and I used them there. And this Australian-built suit, they're called Hot and Dry, they're still around, was absolutely the best dry diving suit I've ever had. And what I didn't know, I walked into my retailers who I would like to say like me. And so I walked in proud as punch saying, oh, I picked up representation for Hot and Dry. And they laughed at me. So after last year, we're not touching that again. You're a nice fellow, but we're not doing that. And I said, what are you talking about? And so then it was revealed to me that the year before, the company had made a change in the inner membrane material that's supposed to keep you dry. And it all delaminated. All of the suits leaked, and they all had to be replaced. So my retailers were, we're not doing that again. And so faced with that challenge, I dove into Dr. Cialdini's materials, and as we need to be, a detective looking for the pieces of information that are genuinely there in the situation. I used what I could. And to make a long story short, within 18 months, we were market leader. So I was converted for life from that point on, basically.
Wow. And it all started with scuba diving.
Yeah, selling snorkels and tanks and wetsuits, all that.
Okay, let's get tactical. For entrepreneurs who are discovering this for the very first time, what is the most impactful principle that they can start and implement first?
All right, I think we need to back up a little bit before we dive into the principles. Let's explain how human decision making works, because that gives us an understanding how that all works, and then we can really appreciate what the principles do, and we'll dive into those afterwards. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay. All right, so how do people actually make decisions? I'm going to lean on the work of a Professor Daniel Kahneman, who died in 2024, and he was a professor in psychology and a behavioral scientist. And he won a Nobel Prize in 2002 in economics. Now, that in itself is a little interesting, right? Behavioral scientist wins Nobel Prize in economics. Normally, you win a Nobel Prize for making an extraordinary contribution to that field. So what can a behavioral scientist figure out that has such an impact on economics? Old economics had a belief, and that belief was that human beings are logical, rational creatures, and we would therefore use logic and reason to formulate our decisions. And Daniel Kahneman proved that was incorrect. And that's what won him the Nobel Prize. So he explained that when it comes to decision making, the human brain, your own brain, your audience's brain, has 2 parts. We have system 1 and system 2. System 1 is fast. It's an, let's say, subconscious brain. It works under our conscious control, and it works automatically. And we use it for everyday decisions. System 1 can read simple sentences. Our instincts come from System 1. And System 1 can even drive a car on an empty road. You know how sometimes you come home and you can't remember what turnoff you took? That's because you weren't driving, System 1 was. And System 1 works a lot on shortcuts. shortcuts that we've learned. A shortcut could be expensive equals good, right? If I'm looking to purchase something that I really know very little about, could be headset, microphone, speakers, TV monitor, front door for your house, anything you don't really know anything about, you could in that moment decide not to make your decision. And you could leave the store and you could hit the library and you could start reading books for a few months and then maybe do some courses to learn that particular topic. And 5 months later, you could come back to the shop and make a well-educated decision about what option to go for. But chances are you don't have the time for that. Certainly not for every decision we need to make in our day because we're very overloaded. And the shortcut, expensive equals good, allows us to make a quicker decision, right? If I just spend a little bit more than I thought I was going to be spending, then chances are I'll get something that's a bit better. It'll last me longer. It's better suited to purpose. And so it allows me to make a quicker decision. There's other shortcuts like that. Another one is if a lot of other people are doing it, it must be the right thing to do, right? In a way, we're herd animals, right? Just like a school of
Yeah.
fish, all the fish turn left. There's no one fish that keeps swimming straight, right? It goes with the crowd. And so we're very much like that because there must be value to what other people, especially a lot of other people, are doing. And so that's system one. Works fast, subconsciously, automatically, and it works largely on shortcuts. On the other side, we have system two. So system two is conscious thought. It works slowly and it costs a lot of effort, a lot of energy to run system two. And Daniel Kahneman refers to it as the lazy controller. It doesn't actually want to engage. System two is quite happy for system one to come up with suggestions, and as long as no alarm bells go off, system two is quite happy for system one to do the work. There's also a caveat to system two. Being the logical, rational brain, it is dependent on our attention. If you have to perform a system two task, it relies on the fact that you have attention. For example, if you're trying to park a car in a tight parking spot, that's where you need system two, right? You need to concentrate. Now, if you're distracted, right, and that parking is not going to turn out so well. So, system one, system two. So, Daniel Kahneman demonstrates back in 2002 that 90% of our decisions are made by system one, subconsciously and automatically, largely based on shortcuts. And that leaves 10% for system two. Later research says that's now 95% or even more that system one does. And that normally brings a few questions up. First of all, we could go, wow, how many decisions can you make on autopilot, for goodness sake, right? Unconsciously, automatically, based on shortcuts. And the other question might be, why is this percentage increasing? And that has to do with our attention span. Our attention span used to be 20 minutes in the 80s. Have you got any idea what the attention span of the goldfish is, Scherrie?
5 seconds.
Oh, I'll give him a little bit more credit. 9 seconds. 9
Okay.
seconds for the goldfish. Our attention span's now 7 seconds. We've been beaten by the goldfish,
We have been beaten by
right?
the goldfish.
The internet had a big impact on us, right? We got a lot of information to us more quicker. We could get to answers quicker and more things were in our day. But then the smartphone came and that was like the nail in the coffin, right? And we've all done that. You need to make a phone call. You grab your phone, you unlock it, right? Or take it off flight mode. 36 apps pop up asking you to make a decision, right? With all these notifications. So that's 36 decisions you need to make. You might open one. Now that takes you to this, takes you to that, another link, an article here, video there. 20 minutes later, you put the phone down and you go, what did I pick that up for? Right? You didn't even last 7 seconds. 2 seconds, you were gone already. And so this explains a few things. Because that percentage is increasing that we're reliant on system one, our fast, intuitive brain, it highlights that there's a mismatch with what we're doing in business compared to what science is teaching us. When we don't know the science, if we don't know how people make decisions, and we're going to change that today for your audience, if we don't know how this works, then when we're thinking about how are we going to convince the other party, how am I going to get them to buy what I'm suggesting? How am I going to get them to buy into my vision? How do I get my idea accepted by my boss? Right? How do I get my child to clean up their room and do their homework this weekend? Like, it's such a big task. When we think about how we're going to achieve that, we are consciously thinking, right? And so we're in system 2. And system 2 tends to come up with the types of information, reasons, that need system 2 in the other person to process that information. And our audience doesn't have the time for that anymore. And so they decide, we actually cause more uncertainty in them. And they decide not to decide. And that's where we circle back to what I said in the beginning. A lot of no's that you might be experiencing are not no's at all. They're indecision. And so what we need is basically a systematic approach where we can use our full brain power, our system, to come up with the pieces of information that qualify as shortcuts for system 1, and therefore make it easier for people to make a decision. And that's exactly what the principles of persuasion that Dr. Cialdini coined, that's what they are. They're basically a roadmap to what these pieces of shortcut information is that we can genuinely and ethically present to our audience so that they can go, you know what, this is good enough for me. Let's move on, instead of deciding not to decide. Does that explain it properly?
It does. Now, and I heard you mention that you don't just wake up and you're able to do this. What sort of training is available to help you?
To learn this, if you'll take my word for it, the best way to learn this is a flagship course that Dr. Cialdini designed that involves us trainers. So people invest, it's not a university course, it doesn't take 3 years. It's about 8-9 hours of online videos that people watch of Dr. Cialdini teaching them the theory, and then combined with typically 8 live group training sessions, typically done online. And so with an investment of probably less than 20 hours over 8 weeks, we go through all the elements of what you can learn about this, but more importantly, we work on practical application skills, and people work on a challenge in their own business or private life so that they walk away with an actionable plan at the end, but also the confidence that they're using it right. Because you can have knowledge, all of us have knowledge, right? You get knowledge on your phone, you can access anything. But what we need, what is powerful, is having application skills. But without confidence, you don't use those either. That's the best way, in my opinion, for an individual or a team to learn that. But especially in a team setting, as in for a company, that might not be the easiest way to start this. So I often do keynotes for businesses. And so in a short period of time, we can excite people about what this is. And team members tend to lean into it because they don't have to lie or cheat, which especially a lot of other sales training makes people uncomfortable. They don't want to treat people like that. So a keynote, as we would say, is a great event to activate the team and an opportunity for leadership to actually see that their team members are leaning into this. They want to know more. And then from there, there's workshops available or the flagship training. And then, of course, as we'll cover at the end, I've also got some complementary learning materials that people can access as well.
Is this something that you could be born with? Some people are born with certain gifts and talents, or something that you have to train for, or is it a combination of the two?
Some people do have a natural tendency to be persuasive. And I'm sure we all know a couple of people that are just those natural persuaders. They can walk into a room and change everybody's opinion around. But on closer investigation, they often just use a few or a couple of the principles of persuasion because by trial and error, they figured out how this works for them, but they don't understand how it works. If you ask them to explain to you how they can convince people, they often have trouble explaining that to you. And the good news is that persuasion is a science, and therefore it can be taught and learned. And so, yeah, you can absolutely learn this and become more persuasive than those people that are naturally persuasive. And the best example is probably Dr. Cialdini himself, because he's not your sort of, the sort of energetic, sort of the person you imagine thinking of a naturally persuasive person. He's a rather introverted university professor, but he's probably the most persuasive person in the world. So people can absolutely learn this. And I would argue it's very fun to learn.
And you mentioned that it's not being taught in schools, but it continues to rank very high for what businesses look for. Why do you think so many entrepreneurs do not study persuasion?
I don't think it's on their radar. They don't know that there actually is nearly 100 years worth of scientific research on how people make decisions. And that's interesting in itself. When Dr. Cialdini became a university professor, which was in the late 70s, there was already nearly 50 years worth of research on this area, which all started in the lead up to the Second World War. When Hitler was starting to come to power, the world was horrified how somebody can gather such a mass following behind them to justify those sorts of strategies, actions, and plans. And so they were doing a lot of research to try and figure out how that works, but it was all laboratory-based research. You put people in a room and sort of experiment on them. And so Dr. Cialdini realized, if I'm going to have to figure this out, how this really works, I'm going to have to go into the real world where the battles of persuasion are fought every single day. And so he did something that was very entrepreneurial for a scientist to do at that time. He took 3 years off, and he, with disguised identity and disguised intent, he enrolled in as many new employee training courses as he could get access to, because every industry teaches its employees the strategies that they've learned worked in their industry. And so he collected all these strategies over a period of 3 years and basically boiled them down to see what is it underneath it that makes this work regardless of the industry that it's in. So yeah, it's not on the radar of a lot of people that the science actually exists, but the impact of it can be enormous. I can give you a couple of examples, if you like, of
Please,
how
yes.
big an impact this can have.
Sure.
All right, let me pick a couple of fun ones. All right, let's do this one. One of my colleagues worked with McDonald's in South America. 600 McDonald's restaurants, because they're owned by one franchise owner. Will you believe it? And they were interested to see if they could increase dessert sales. And so McDonald's had a piece of information, a fact about the situation that they'd had for many years, but they didn't know what value it had. Neither did they know where to use it, that piece of information. And so my colleague helped them to raise that piece of information to the surface at the right time, which was in the drive-through or at the counter as people place their order. And as a result, dessert sales went up across the category by 52%.
Wow.
With a sentence. All right? No lying, no cheating, just the right piece of information at the right time. Another example, T-Mobile, big telecommunications company in North America and Europe, they were selling products on their website like a lot of us do. And those products were in the wrong order. By reordering them, their top of the line product, as in so much call, so much data included, their most costly options product that they had, sales increased by 34.4%
Wow.
by changing the order, right? And that's the beauty of this, that once you know how it works, the implementation of it is often costless. To change the order on a website costs nothing. To get your salesperson or your receptionist to utter a single sentence doesn't cost you anything. But the impact of allowing people to let that yes decision surface instead of getting that non-decision disguised as a no can be large. Shall we dive into some principles?
Yes, please.
All right, cool. This is the best part. All right, so there are 7 principles of persuasion, and we call those universal principles because they work in all cultures, all languages, and all countries, which is exceedingly important, right? Our cultures are intermixed within our own country, right? And it's easier and easier to do business with people in other countries. So this is something that works everywhere. Now, as I mentioned, there's 7 principles. Now, all these words you've heard before, right? Reciprocity is one of them. Everybody knows what reciprocity is. And in business, we probably also have a little bit of an idea what we should do with that. But most people have no idea what the activators are or what the amplifiers are of all these principles, what makes them work harder. And there's probably a dozen or more different strategies per principle. So whilst we might have read a book, we might have watched a video or listened to a podcast channel, right? That's not going to actually teach you this properly or get you the application skill. But let's dive in. So 7 principles. Let's start with reciprocity. Reciprocity works because we have a rule inside of us that we should not take without giving in return, right? We've got nasty names for people who take without giving in return, right? Shake your head, some people.
No comment.
And we get taught that from an early age, right? If, I don't know, grandma gives us something nice, right? The mom and dad goes, oh, that was lovely from grandma. Now, what are we going to do for grandma? We're always reciprocating. And so we have a rule inside of us that we should give back the same type of behavior that was first given to us. And so that makes for a very nice sort of mechanism within our societies. It becomes possible to give something to one person without actually giving it away. It circles back again, which is incredibly efficient and wonderful. So from a persuasion perspective, people are more likely to say yes to someone when they feel they owe something to that person. And so basically what we want to do is we want to think, how can we help this person in this situation genuinely? With reciprocity, we want to help other people, or give things away. But in business, that's often misinterpreted. A lot of businesses invest in what they think will activate reciprocity, but they're completely missing the mark. So it doesn't actually work for them. I'll give you a quick example of that. The use of a free ebook that people can download on somebody's website, right? Just put your name in, email address. We'll send you the download link, our gift to you, right? And it's a nice try, but that's not a gift. A gift is something that's given without a requirement needing to be met. And in case of the downloadable ebook, it was name and email address first, then we will send you the download link. So it wasn't a gift, it was a reward. And so people don't feel that there's something to reciprocate. They feel like they paid for it with their email address, which you're probably going to put in a newsletter. And so it's important to do that right. So what you could do is, I'm not saying a downloadable ebook under those circumstances is not a good lead generator. I'm just saying it won't activate reciprocity. But why not have both? Why not have something people can download after surrendering a name and email address, but have a checklist as well? And this checklist, I don't know, these are the 15 things that you should contemplate if you want to grow your business. And have that available as just a simple download. Right click and download. It's yours to have. No name, no email address required. That will activate reciprocity. So next time when you come, hey, we've got a webinar, come join us, you'll be empowered by that bit of reciprocity sitting there. All right, let me move on. You can take notes, and if you want me to circle back to something and we have time, we can. Next principle is the principle of liking. We like to deal with people that we like, which is not rocket science. We like people that are similar to us. We like people that like us. We like people that like us and say so. So that's a lot of information. Let's break that down. We like people, or we like to deal with people that we like, right? So if they're likable, that's typically what sales training will teach you, right? Oh, you got to be likable so people like you. It's not wrong, but it's not the most powerful. We like people that are similar to us. If we can find similarities between ourselves and the person we deal with and bring that to the surface, people like us more, right? So do some homework. If you've got a meeting coming up, go onto social media, find out what they value, what they do, what do they do in their free time. Look for genuine commonalities and bring that up in conversation. If you're going to have a business meeting, don't dive straight into business. Share some personal stuff first. Try and uncover what you might have in common with someone. Then we like people that like us and say so, means that we are suckers for compliments, right? A compliment is the nicest and easiest way to get into the good books with someone. And there's no need to think of false compliments. Right? You can look for genuine things that you can appreciate about someone and make a genuine compliment on that. And that'll go a long way. So that's the principle of liking. Then there's the principle of unity, which is the one that was actually added last in 2015 after additional research. So unity is often confused with liking. Liking is similarities. Unity is feeling part of the same community, right? When you go to a sports event or something, right, and you all wear the same colors, right, all of a sudden you feel more close and you have more favoritism to those people who are part of the same community. I love riding my motorcycle, right? Motorcycle riders also have this community, right? We greet each other on the road. If somebody's pulled over on the side of the road looking at their engine, won't take too long for another biker to pull over and say, do you need anything? Do you need a ride? Do you need help? So, right, we can describe that group of people as we, this feeling of we-ness. And that's what is behind unity. Localism is also part of unity. So if I figure out that you and I went to the same school together or university together, or we grew up in the same suburb as each other, all of a sudden we just like each other more. So again, you can have that with the next person you're trying to do a business deal with, or a manager that you're trying to get to buy into your vision. If you can figure out you got these things in common, that can make that a lot easier. Also, co-creation is part of unity. If we work together on something, that unity feeling starts to develop. All right, moving on. So social proof is a very popular principle, as in most businesses now are collecting online reviews, which is wonderful. Good that we're doing that. And if you think that is important for your business, I'm glad to hear it. But let me also tell you that reviews is like this much, as in it's a little piece of what social proof actually has to offer you. There's so much more to it. So social proof works because we follow the actions of others, especially when we are uncertain, and when the others are numerous and similar to us. So I've given you some activators and amplifiers here. Okay. So let me give you an example. Let's say you're doing a sales pitch and you have some slides that you're sharing, and on there you've got some headshots of people and some testimonials of past clients that used you and were happy. That's great. That's social proof. But now imagine that those are 5 testimonials that you really like. And there's an 18-year-old entrepreneur that used your services, and there's a middle-aged woman and a middle-aged man. There's an older couple, and there's an older man, right? Those are your 5 testimonials. Now, you know that you're going into a business meeting with a middle-aged woman. Now, if you turn up with these 5 testimonials, that's still social proof, still good.
Right.
But if you were a detective of persuasion, you would go through your testimonials. You probably have more than 5, right? You go through your testimonials and you find 5 of other mature women, or sorry, middle-aged women we're talking about, right? 5 middle-aged women. You can feel it, right? If you saw 5 testimonials of people that were just like you, that is much more powerful. It's more, if it was right for them, chances are it'll be right for me. So that's social proof. Then there's the principle of authority. So authority works on the rule that we like to follow the advice of other people who have genuinely more knowledge and wisdom on a particular topic than we do. And that makes sense too. We can't know everything. And so if there's somebody there who knows more about this than we do, it makes sense to follow their advice. If you have any arguments or persuasive appeals to people, you can support those by, let's say, experts' opinions of other people. For example, Professor Daniel Kahneman, right? I use that because Daniel Kahneman says system one runs the show. That's the one that you need to move, right? So I now have the authority of a Nobel Prize winning professor that says you all should listen to what I'm sharing with you, right? So you can import experts' advice into what it is you're saying, but we ourselves, to some extent, we are also experts in our field, right? We also know our business. We also know our stuff. And so how do you get your expertise across to other people? That's not so straightforward. A lot of business people do this wrong. They walk into a meeting and they go, "Hi, my name is Patrick. Let me tell you the 35 reasons why you should listen to me. And I'm such a clever ass," right? It's just, it doesn't really work. As in, people might subconsciously, there's a big chance that they go, "You're full of yourself," right? And we lose on authority and we lose on liking. So we can't do that. Once we're face to face, we've lost the opportunity to introduce our credentials. We must get somebody else to do that for us. That's the lesson here. Then we've got two principles left. Principle of consistency works because we feel an internal pressure to stay true with past actions and statements that we've made or that we've taken. Again, society worries about us when we say we would do one thing and then do something totally different, right? We're unreliable. That's not even such a nasty word for it, but we don't want to be labeled with these sort of bad names. So we go to great lengths to make sure if we said we do one thing or we supported a particular viewpoint, that we stay true to that previous statement. And so that's why in our communication, we should give people the opportunity to reveal to us what their stands on things are or what they value, what's important to them. And then by knowing what's important to them, if we can figure out what we can do in our proposal to match what's important to them, which I would say is highly ethical, then it becomes really hard to say no to that. So that's consistency. And the last one is scarcity. So scarcity functions on the rule that we perceive things to be more valuable when they are less available, right? So things that are scarce, things that are dwindling in availability, we want them more. And so a quick tip I can give your audience already: look at your own brochures, look at your own websites, listen to your own sales team. When it comes to highlighting what people benefit from moving into your direction, as in accepting what it is you have to say, accepting your idea, buying what it is you're offering. When we try and portray that to people, what they stand to benefit, we use typically gaining language, right? You get there faster, you save money, it's good for the environment, right? It's things that we gain, things that we get more. And that's nice, but we are far more interested, or we take action much more readily by a fear of loss than a potential gain. And everything you can pitch as a potential gain, you can also explain it in terms of what they would be missing out on if they don't get this thing. And that is easily twice more persuasive than gain language. Yeah. So that's how we're doing for time. But those are the 7 principles.
Oh no, look, you're doing great in terms of the information, and I do have a question. But if you had one piece of information to share with entrepreneurs on how to play big faster, to use some of these principles, how can they be the most effective to get started?
All right. I would say that the one thing to realize to start playing big, as we can tell from those success percentages, what actually happens when you start using this information, is to realize that there's a science to how decisions are made. And that without you or your team using this, you are losing every single day. So I think it's more an avoidance of loss that we need to actually start investigating this. In terms of tips of what you could do, all the principles have their own importance and values, but I think it's good to realize this. There are three things that you need to get compliance from someone, to get agreement. One thing is that you need a strong relationship, right? If people don't like you, don't really like you, it's very hard to get compliance. If they don't like you, they're going to make a lot of effort to go around you, to not deal with you, right? So
Yeah.
if we have a weak relationship, then we should probably work on that first. It makes no sense to try and motivate somebody to action when the relationship doesn't exist. So relationship is important. If we do have good relationship, it could be that people love you, but they're just not sure about what it is you're offering. And of course, a lot of objections like, oh, it's too expensive, got to talk about it with my partner. And we've heard this before, right? You haven't shown enough value. Or in other words, they're still uncertain that what it is you're proposing is right for them. So if the relationship is there, we need to reduce uncertainty. And so there's different principles of persuasion that helps to reduce that. Once we have a strong relationship, once we have reduced uncertainty, we all know potential clients like that, right? They love us. They love what it is we do, what we offer, but they're still not buying it, right? So now motivation, right? Relationship is there. Uncertainty is gone or reduced, right? Now we need to motivate people into action. And so then is a good time to use principles like consistency and scarcity to motivate people into action. So yeah, a thing to start to big faster is to realize that there's a science to persuasion and that you need to work on the right step in that journey to compliance depending on who it is you're dealing with. That's why there's also not one principle that you would say, what's the best principle to use? Because it depends on who you're talking to.
So you mentioned that you have a podcast. Tell us a little bit more about the podcast and how to get your book.
Yeah, thank you for asking. So yeah, if people want to know more, I've recently started my own podcast, Ethical Persuasion Unlocked, and I was very blessed Dr. Cialdini recorded the introduction for me. In there, I share a lot about persuasion insights. Of course, it's not a course, but you'll learn a lot, especially episode 2 goes into the science of human decision making. That'd be a good one to dive into, number 1 and 2. And yeah, I'll continue to share things. I'll get colleagues to come on, but I'll also have guests on to talk about a wider approach to business growth. So business growth is the overall topic with a heavy flavor of persuasion science. So ethical persuasion unlocked. You can find that in the usual places where you get your podcasts. The book I wrote, How to Hear Yes More Often, I wrote with some colleagues of mine. You can buy that in all the normal online places where you buy books. If you haven't got Dr. Cialdini's book, Influence yet, Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion, that should absolutely be on your bookshelf. It's considered by many top CEOs to be the best business book of all time. So if you're going to buy that, also as an audiobook, very powerful, maybe combine it with the purchase of How to Hear Yes More Often, which has a far more practical approach. Dr. Cialdini's book is more about the background and the science, fascinating read. Our book aimed to add to that with practical examples. I can also share some complementary resources with your audience. If you go to my website, ethicalpersuasion.com.au, because I am in Australia, then you can obviously find out more about me. But if you go to the menu option, there's free, and there's some free tools that you can find. There's a downloadable ebook. No name or email required. Just right click and download, yours to have. So it's a true gift. There's a 7-day email challenge where you get a nugget of persuasion gold every day. So of course, for that, we do need your email address. And other than that, the podcast is great. And should anybody be listening who is either part of a school, university. I am passionate about trying to introduce this topic to young adults before they enter the workforce. I'm quite happy to donate my time to provide an introduction at universities or via Zoom or that sort of stuff. So if anybody's interested in that, please have a look on my website and reach out to us.
Well, Patrick, thank you so much for stopping by the podcast.
You're welcome. It was great to have you here, and I hope people got a lot from it. And if you did learn something from it and you used it and it benefited from you, I'm sure Scherrie would love to hear that you got something from her podcast. Leave her an online review. If you can pay any compliment to any podcast host, it would be to leave a review, right? And second to that, if you did use anything, you had some experiences, leave some comments on both of our social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, about what your experience was and how it worked for you. We'd love to hear. It's from the field.
Thanks so much. And until next time, play big faster. And for those who may be watching or listening, if you've enjoyed this conversation, please follow us on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, and you'll get more great conversations like these. Until next time, play big faster.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Play Big Faster podcast. Want more entrepreneurial content?
I like this.
Make sure to subscribe for future episodes.
Already subscribed.
I just clicked on it.
Don't forget to like and leave a review. Share with a friend that needs this in their life.
I think you need this more than I.
Oh, and make sure to follow Scherrie on IG at Scherrie Speaks. And remember to play big faster.